Hello, this is Jim, and I live in Texas. And what I'm going to try to do is demonstrate adding a Powerlet socket to a Yamaha FJR. Orange for the socket. Eventually, if this all works out, there will be a Powerlet socket right where that key is there. I'm no Busasaurus Rex. When I started this, when I got this bike, I said, Jim, you're doing no maintenance on this bike other than oil changes maybe. It's a brand new bike. It's got it's either 4 or 5 year extended warranty. You have no business even putting a wrench on it. And I've kind of, I'm going to stick to that mostly, but since this is primarily an electrical issue, and I'm comfortable with electrical things, I'm going to give it a try. Now what we're going to start with is the hard part. I think is going to be the most difficult part. Is I've got to lift that tank up so that I can get snake wires under it. The battery on an FJR is actually in the upper right fairing area under the right grip there. So I've got to get to the battery there. I'm going to have to lift the tank. The instructions with the Powerlet say remove 2 bolts and lift the tank. Well, it's a lot more to it than that. But I often visit the FJRforum.com, and there's a user, Rickster, there who has published detailed instructions on how to lift the tank or remove it. And I'm going to try to follow those, and we'll see how this goes. And I'm about ready to start here. I'll be back in a few minutes when I've got something to show you. Step 1, according to Rickster, is to remove this 4mm bolt and this plastic fairing screw that holds this tank fairing. Of course, there's the same thing on the other side, so I'm going to remove these 2 first. Let's see how this goes. Okay, those 4 screws, the little plastic thing came out, and I didn't drop them into the bike like I was afraid I was going to do. So the next thing to do is to remove this fairing here. That's the tank, the fairing where it covers up the joint between the tank and the bike itself. So let's pull that off and see how this goes. I'll be right back. Okay, here's the fairing. I cannot thank Rickster enough for putting his detailed instructions on FJRforum.com, because this plastic shaft here goes into this grommet hole, and it was a little reluctant to pull out of there, and I think and the shop manual doesn't go into that level of detail. So had I not had his very clear pictures and kind of his reassurance that, yeah, give it a good tug and it'll pop out, and it did, I might have given up right there, because the last thing I want to do is break a piece of plastic. I broke plastic on my Ninja and probably knocked $500 off of the resale value by doing that. So I'm paranoid about these plastic pieces, but thanks to Rickster, I got the fairing off. So let's see what's next. Okay, I forgot to introduce this, but here at the front of the bike, where under the stem nut are 2 nuts, 2 Allen head nuts, or hex head nuts, that hold the front of the tank down. Those came out with no problem. The main thing I was scared about there was A, scratching the tank against this rag here, and B, even worse, dropping one of them down into the fairing and having it disappear. I've had that happen on my Ninja, where I've dropped something, it's gone into the fairing and disappeared. And the Ninja has a far less complicated fairing system than the FJR. It's like night and day. So I was really glad I didn't drop one of those nuts. If you're working on a fairing bike, you got to realize they can really eat little parts if you drop them. So we're making good progress so far, thanks to Rickster and the FJR and Mr. Yahmaha. Okay, I think the tank is going to lift enough to let me snake the wire in here. I'm going to take the battery off, the battery cover off. For those of you not familiar with the FJR, this is called panel A in the manual. It's held on by 2 Torx bolts, and there's the world's funkiest crazy plastic connector that's down in there. I've taken this off once before, and it's pretty funky. You know, having the battery way up here kind of contributes to the little bit of top heaviness, which is the only thing I don't like about this bike. It's a fairly top heavy bike. But I guess that's where they had to put it. If you're going to have a 140 horsepower engine, you know, that's going to take up most of the space under the tank. So anyway, I pulled out one torch bolt there. I'll take this one out, and I'll futz around with this ridiculous, crazy plastic pin that's in there, see if I can get it out and see if I can pull this cover off. So I can get at the battery and actually start the electrical work. Okay, before I install the actual Powerlet wiring, I'm going to try to install this Powerlet Farkle. This actually would be Farkle number 3, I guess you would call it. I'm not sure this is possible looking at it. I may have to send this back or sell it. This is from Powerlet. What it is it's a kind of a distribution block object. You can see, I hope, you can see, yeah, you can see there that this had that little brass or copper fitting has 4 screws in it where you could bind electrical connectors, and it's got this in the FJR. I'm not sure. There's the battery. I'm not sure this is possible. There just may not be room for it because this panel fits real tight right over that. But I'm going to give it a try and we'll see what happens. Okay, we're making progress. I was able to lift the tank enough. I just put that little piece of wood in there, and that was enough to route the rear set Powerlet harness here to the back of the bike, where it's going to need to go wind up down there. So now, okay, I've got to quit saying okay at the start of everything. Oh, let's turn Leo Laporte on. Okay, for today, I've wired the battery pretty much according to, this is the fuse for it, and I've got it connected here at the positive terminal. You might not be able to quite see that. I'll connect the negative terminal up last. It's run under the tank. I've lowered the tank back down. I've put a jack under the exhaust pipe because the rear set is what holds the exhaust pipe up, and so I want to be sure that if I screw this up that there's something to kind of catch it, not let it just break off of there. But the main thing right now is to get the Powerlet mechanically installed on this rear set, do the final wiring hookup, and see if I have heat. Okay. I'm almost ready to smoke test. I see I've sealed the battery back up in its airtight container here. The only thing that's different now is this fuse box for the rear Powerlet. I've wire tied down there. The wire tie runs under the tank, just like we talked about. Comes out here and goes down there to the rear Powerlet, the rear seat Powerlet. Now, this is the one disappointment that I've had with this. There's the Powerlet there. Let's see, can you see it? The Powerlet's there. There, I think you can see it now. That's it. I had to run this wire through here. This is the place where your hand goes to put it on the center stand. I don't like seeing this wire outside of the frame, but I could not figure out a way. This the whole bottom is completely sealed up, as near as I can tell. I couldn't figure out another way to do it. Since I want to be able to ride when it's cold, I did it like that for now. I already know I'm going to come back and revisit this setup because I want something that's more amenable to putting more than one device. Okay, this is Jim, and I have finished my Farkle. I managed, the tank went together just fine. The tank went back on, bolted down just fine. The battery compartment bolted up just fine. The only thing you can tell is if you look close in here, you see this fuse holder here is for the rear Powerlet socket. I don't think that'll interfere with anything. There's the only disappointment is right here. You can see this wire here down to the socket, which probably doesn't show up very well because of the light, but there's a nice Powerlet socket right there. I could not figure out how to route that wire inside of the fairing because there's a plastic kind of liner that separates the outside world from the area under the seat. And then I'm going to go watch some YouTube, and I hope I see your videos up there. This is Jim, and I live in Texas.